I'd say we have a pretty good foundation here. Hey everybody, welcome to After Action Report, your recap show for Ultimate on matches to keep you caught up on all the action. I am your host Megs here for the Call to Action podcast channel. Today we're going to be breaking down stats and storylines for Friday Night Titans episode 7. Without further ado, let's jump right into our first scene. To start off, we see Ben and Drew coming in, laughing about all the moments that had just happened during the last couple matches. Drew then makes the comment that they can't keep being action. Ben wants to keep going and feels that he is at his best while doing it. But Drew likes being on the desk, feels it has made him better, and the league is better for it. It's not like how it was when team action was playing. Ben needs to push others up, build up the den, and go be a champion and go get both belts. Ben seems disappointed, but agrees. So this was a real bittersweet scene to watch. I have been Action Army from the very beginning ever since I started watching this league. This does seem to be the official passing on of the torch, and stars are now becoming legend. Now, I love seeing Drew on the desk, so it's going to be really exciting to see him get back on the desk, and we actually see him on the desk for both matches in this event, so that was really neat to see. If you remember your history back in 2019, this was the point in which Ben turned into more of the, I'm going to take the game seriously, I didn't respect the game, and that was the time when he was able to get the singles championship, was during that year. And then when he lost the belt and the subsequent loss to Dan in the next year was when he turned back to more of his heel persona. We're not sure exactly where Ben's landing right now, because clearly in the last two matches, he has been very much back to his old Action Days heel character. But with this recent development, it's going to be interesting to see what his character does from here on out. Moving on to something a little bit lighter of a note, we open another scene on Jacoby deciding on what kind of snack he wants. Riley suddenly comes in and proceeds to lay out all the woes of success that he experienced in the league, and all the betrayals and things that had happened to him up to this point. After hearing all that, Jacoby is still really excited to get a match. Riley has Jacoby follow him, and we walk in on Winston and Clee Wiggins sitting down having a nice chat. Riley waltzes in, has a nice chat with Winston, and they both agree that Jacoby and Clee will play in a match. Now, I am really loving seeing Jacoby playing with this awkward, enthusiastic kid. It is a big ball of energy, and it is a lot of fun to watch. We got some nice callbacks here to Schmoedown history, with Riley making reference to when he was a two-time singles champion and subsequently losing both of those titles. And then also when Ben Bateman betrayed him during Spectacular 5 in 2020, leaving him without a teammate. Arguably, that was actually one of my favorite scenes to watch during that digital era. Leave down in the comments if you have any other favorite scenes from that era. And this scene leads us right into the first match of the night, with Jacoby Bancroft facing off against Clee Wiggins. Coming out of round 1, Jacoby is up by 2, 10-8, where he is able to get a perfect round 1, but does miss the bonus. Coming into round 2, Jacoby defers to have Clee spin first, and she decides to take Jennifer Aniston on her first spin. Clee comes away with 4 out of 10 points, checks down to multiple choice 3 times, misses a 2-point question and one of the multiple choice questions, and that multiple choice question is stolen for 1 point. Jacoby, on his spin, decides to take the 2010s on the first attempt. He comes away with 5 out of 10 points, checks down to multiple choice 3 times, misses 2 of those multiple choice questions, and has them both stolen for 2 points. When all is said and done, Jacoby is still up by 2, 16-14. And coming into round 3, it is a tennis match back and forth, with Clee hitting a 2-pointer in Happy Madison, Jacoby hits his 2-pointer in Horror, back over to Clee for a 3-pointer in Harrison Ford, and Jacoby with his 3-pointer in Gene Hackman. Clee hits her 5-pointer in Martial Arts Movies. It's back over to Jacoby, who does miss his 5-pointer in The Eastwoods. And this gives Clee the win with a final score of 24-21, where Jacoby Bancroft answered 16 of 21 questions for 76% accuracy and scored 62% of 34 available points. Clee Wiggins answered 16 of 20 questions for 80% accuracy and scored 73% of 33 available points. So first off, it was great to see Clee Wiggins and Winston Marshall back. Them as a duo, as a manager and competitor, was really nice to see. The sweet tea was a nice touch. And as I expected, I thoroughly loved seeing Riley in a manager role and Jacoby just being a wonderful and lovable ball of energy. I did find it interesting that both competitors ended up sticking with their first initial spins. Clee's first spin was an actress who is new for this season, so she was able to navigate it relatively well, but not necessarily the slam dunk category that she might have been hoping for. Jacoby, on the other hand, with his first spin, ended up with the 2000s, which, again, as I mentioned last week, those broad categories can be tricky because you never know if you're going to end up with 5 questions you just don't have any reference for. Again, he navigated it relatively well, but neither of them came away with necessarily high scores out of their rounds. Leave your comments on the strategy of their decisions to stick with those initial spins. We take a trip outside where we see Shannon and Mike taking a walk, Shannon telling Mike not to underestimate Paige, and Mike's thinking that maybe she's underestimating him. Suddenly, we see the fan favorites appear and start taking jabs at Mike. Mike tells Paige that he had fun watching her play, but he wants that singles belt and she is in the way. Shannon manages to calm herself down and they leave without much of a fight. Now, it was very interesting to see Shannon take a more measured approach to how she reacted to the fan favorites' antics at her star player. And do we think that Paige might be biting off more than she can chew? She had her whole gang of guys around her when she went after Mike this time, but what's it going to be like when she is one-on-one with him on a desk? Let's jump into the match and find out. Coming out of round 1, Mike is up by 2, 11-9, with Mike getting the perfect round plus the bonus. In round 2, Mike defers to have Paige spin first, who spins away from Batman and ends up taking Jennifer Connelly. Paige comes away with 9 out of 10 points, checking down a multiple choice once but not giving away any steal opportunities. Mike spins away from SCTV alumni on his first spin and ends up taking Keanu Reeves, where he comes away with 7 out of 10 points, checking down a multiple choice twice, missing one of those questions, and it is stolen for 1 point by Paige. This gives Paige a gain of 3 points to where she is now up by 1, 19-18. Where we see Mike hits his 3-pointer in the 2000s. This bounces it back to Paige for a 2-pointer in Sly and Arnie, which she misses, but does hit her 3-pointer in Harrison Ford to bounce it back over to Mike to answer a 3-pointer in Mystery and Thrillers, then back to Paige for her 5-pointer in New Releases that she hits. This forces Mike to have to answer a 5-pointer in Horror, which he does hit, and this gives Mike the win with a final of 28-27, where Mike Kalinowski answered 18 of 19 questions for 95% accuracy and scored 90% of 31 available points. Paige Verbetti answered 17 of 19 questions for 90% accuracy and scored 84% of 32 available points. Now, don't worry, I'm going to talk about that round 3 question here in a little bit, but let's talk about a couple other things that I noticed during the match prior to this. So overall, I feel like these two were pretty evenly matched, while there were a couple crucial errors that Paige made during the match. Now, the big one that I saw initially was the miss in round 1. Only reason I highlight this one is while, yes, they were asking about a Harry Potter and obviously an IG-related movie, Zoe Kravitz has also very recently been in The Batman, which, again, is an IG movie, but it is something that has been very much talked about in the movie industry, so it would make sense that you would make note of what the other actors and actresses have been in their careers. And then moving into round 2, it doesn't surprise me or I don't fault her at all for spinning away from Batman. Even if you felt comfortable in that category, it's not necessarily wise to take an IG category when you have the reigning and defending IG champion sitting across from you. Overall, she comes away with a really nice round in Jennifer Connelly, only giving up 1 available point, but not giving away any steals. Mike, on the other hand, has a couple struggles with his Keanu Reeves category. He does manage to only give away 1 point worth of steals, but this does change the lead to where Paige is able to get now back ahead only by 1 point, but that can be all it takes in round 3. But then we get to round 3. On the episode of The Rundown, when they went through all the changes to the rules that were coming, William Bignani specifically addressed this rule. Now, unless you are talking about movies where there are clearly 2 possible titles, i.e. Suicide Squad or The Suicide Squad, or if you're talking about movies that have only 2 words like The Thing or The One, it is perfectly acceptable to leave off an article at the beginning of a movie title. You just can't add an article, which is what Paige did, or you can't change the article. So you can't say a in place of the. She answered the question fairly quickly, and even if you were trying to argue that she was just saying the movie is the last action hero, like the wasn't part of the title, she was asked to repeat her answer, and she clearly said the last action hero. Per the rule book, Paige did give an incorrect answer and had to be ruled incorrect. And that was the change in the tide that Mike needed, because he was able to come away with all 10 of his points to come away with the win. But we aren't done with the drama yet in this match. We see Ben the Boss Bateman crash the post-match interview for Mike, does apologize for doing so, and proceeds to give Mike props for doing a great job and thinks it would be fun for them to do this again. He wants to play the best and earn that singles belt and invites Mike to play him in a singles match. He's very respectful about it. Shannon and Jen don't quite know what to make of it. And Drew is very excited by what he just saw. So based on his reaction, it appears that this is exactly what Drew was trying to push Bateman into doing. Being the vet that he is, challenging the top players and going after those belts again. So some history on how these two have fared off against each other. Ben and Mike have faced off against each other multiple times in teams with Team Action, DC Movie News, Corruption, Who's the Boss, and also Danger Zone. So both of these competitors have faced each other in every iteration of their respective teams. It's a really interesting little factoid there. But as far as singles goes, they have only faced off against each other 1 time, and that was in 2019, where Mike was able to get the victory over Ben Bateman, and that was Ben's only loss during that 2019 season when he was able to get the singles title at the end of that year. So it's going to be very interesting to see this match, not only from the standpoint of seeing if Ben can finally get a win over Mike in singles, but also how each of their respective personalities match up against each other, because Ben seems to be trying to take on a more mature, mentoring persona, and we're not quite sure what Mike's doing. Shannon certainly seems to be turning over a bit of a new leaf. We'll see how much of an impact she has on her competitor. And just when you think we're starting to wrap things up, we have yet another crash where we see the stars come in and Roxy proceeds to introduce her 3 champions, being Chandru, Mr. Irwin, and Nick Harley. Mr. Irwin is going to be partnering with Slick Nick Harley. Roxy introduces the new team as the Appointment and gives a gift of an opportunity for one of her former competitors, Adam Gertler, and Eric Zipper to play in a match against the Appointment. Now, talk about callbacks to history. Speaking of DC Movie News and Mike, Adam Gertler was also on that team, and Roxy Stryer was their manager at that time. So a lot of neat callbacks to early Schmoedown history all throughout this episode. So this is going to be a very interesting match because Zipper has had some relative success in the team's division. We haven't seen Adam Gertler in the MTS proper. He was in the FCL last season. We haven't seen him back in the regular league since he was with DC Movie News. again, these guys are calling their shots. Chandra's not pulling any punches with how idiotic he feels the fans are. Mr. Irwin calling his shots as well. He has actually played and gotten wins in all three divisions, so he's not totally off base by claiming dominance, though your definition of dominance may or may not be a little different than mine. And Harley just seems to be fitting right back into his heel persona that he had when he was in the FCL, and seems to be fitting right in with the Stars. In our final scene, we see Shannon finding Roxy outside and proceeds to tell her that Shannon sees what Roxy's doing and what's happening, and warns her about the cost of what she is doing, and losing people's loyalty could come back to bite her. Roxy seems to just brush her off and walks away. So it appears that Shannon is realizing that some of the mistakes that she made from a managerial standpoint in her early seasons have really come back to hurt her. And she seems to also be wanting to impart some of that to Roxy, who seems to also be potentially doing the exact same thing, or at least Shannon feels that that's what she's doing. But Roxy doesn't seem too concerned about it. So time will tell if Roxy does end up regretting some of these decisions. So all in all, a lot of really cool things in this episode. The theme overall so far this season has been to prop up new competitors and to utilize existing personalities to really push forward this new iteration of the MTS. And shifting the focus back to more of the entertainment side of the MTS that those of us that have been fans since before we went to digital have been really excited to see come back. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode, but don't worry, I'm right back here next week breaking down all the action on the next Friday Night Titans. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit like on this video, click subscribe, and be sure to leave comments here or at the socials listed down below. The match breakdowns that I presented during this episode will be posted to Twitter and Facebook. Until next time, for the entire Call to Action podcast crew, I am your host, Megs. This is After Action Report, signing off.